Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemary Miller here with Clifford Oliver, a former senior executive with FEMA, here to tell us how the agency typically handles disasters like the Maui wildfire. Thank you so much for joining me today, Clifford.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So, could you tell me what steps are usually taken for recovery in these instances?
In the Maui fire right now, what's going on is they're transitioning between response and recovery. They're continuing the response phase and identifying those that perished in the fire, collecting the remains. But we're also concerned about taking care of those people that are the survivors. And the president declared a presidential disaster, which opens up a host of federal aid to people who have been impacted in the disaster area. The first step is FEMA has these survivors apply for disaster assistance. They can do it online, they call in. We also put people out in the field to assist them in submitting applications. And then the assistance starts to flow towards people. Initially, in this case, out in Maui, each family was given about $700 in cash just to get them off the street, out of their cars, into a hotel, whatever we need to do to get them out of the shelter, out of their cars. And then additional assistance is provided. As an example, at this point in Maui, as of yesterday, there was only about 160 people left in shelters. The couple of thousand people that were made homeless were either taken in by family or some people volunteered to take them in. Also, FEMA provided cash to anyone who didn't get another option to get a hotel room. The
Okay.
governor reported as of yesterday, I think 400 families had gotten into hotel rooms. So we will get everyone pretty quickly within a couple of days into some type of suitable temporary housing. There are other federal programs that will start to flow. There are emergency food stamp programs to get people money to buy food. There is a disaster unemployment program. A lot of people have been made unemployed. The hotels shutting down and the hospitality industry kind of taking a pause has created a large number of unemployed. Those will be eligible for temporary unemployment assistance. There's a whole family of assistance that is brought by various federal agencies under what's called the National Response Framework, which is the federal framework that gets turned on when the president declares a presidential disaster. It includes a whole bunch of federal agencies. The Corps of Engineers, under the National Response Framework, is on the ground helping to restore electricity, helping to get the water system back up and running. They've been working on identifying alternate sites for temporary medical facilities. A whole host of federal agencies are already on the ground helping out. Some agencies are already there. The Coast Guard, which was rescuing people that jumped in the water to escape the fire, were there even as the event was unfolding. So the whole federal family is involved, as the president has said. The full force of the federal government will be there to help the people of Maui. And this is true in any disaster that gets declared. We will be there for them. We will work with them. We will stay there for the long haul to help these communities recover.
So, could you explain what the long haul is? Because obviously, this impact will go on for months, years, but I'm
Years. Yeah.
sure, I'm sure assistance won't be granted for years. Am I wrong?
Assistance can go on for a very long time, depending on the nature of the disaster. Some disasters create very complicated housing situations. I mean, if you look at Maui, it's an island. If it was on the mainland, we could probably bring in temporary housing, like manufactured housing, and put people in temporary housing, even on their home sites, where their homes are being rebuilt. That's not going to be an option in an island like in Maui. So we have to come up with innovative approaches to providing temporary housing for people, whether it's long-term rental assistance. And that assistance can go on for an extended period of time, a year and a half or more. Temporary housing assistance is often provided. And the same with emergency food stamps and unemployment insurance. They can go on for well more than a year as people need. And we then move into the rebuilding phase. The rebuilding phase can take a very long time. The example of the Northridge earthquake in California, um, FEMA was involved in rebuilding in the Northridge earthquake for a decade. We opened
Really?
an office in the area where the Northridge earthquake happened, and FEMA ran that office for over a decade. So um, FEMA does not have an endpoint. We stay until the job gets done. Obviously, it's in everyone's interest to get it done as quickly as possible, but some rebuilding efforts are very complicated, very lengthy, very expensive, and FEMA will stay there to work with states and communities as long as they need to.
So, could you tell me like some of the top priorities of FEMA right now, the top three priorities?
Well, they're still in the response phase. They're still in the recovery phase of those that passed away in the fire. That's obviously a top priority. And then for the survivors, food, shelter, medical assistance as needed. Those are the main things and so the basic things that need to sustain life will be addressed first. And then again, we'll move into things like the unemployment, food stamps. Um, there's burial assistance. FEMA will assist in the cost of burying those that passed away in the fire. There's really a full wraparound set of services that FEMA provides survivors and the families of those that perished in a disaster. Pretty comprehensive package.
So, do you have a preliminary sense of how much rebuilding is likely to cost?
Well, in a fire, the interesting factor that has to be considered is many people will have insurance. And so FEMA does not do what's called duplication of benefits. FEMA will provide assistance to somebody who already will be receiving a payout from property insurance from the loss of their home due to a fire. So the process starts with if someone has a homeowner's insurance policy or a commercial property has as a property policy, that they process a claim through their insurance company, and then FEMA works to meet what's called unmet needs. We try to match up between the gap of what's covered by insurance and then what's not, that are eligible benefits that people can receive under FEMA's regulations. So, say someone owned their home outright, and because they own their home outright, they weren't required to get insurance, property insurance, and say they didn't, so they have a total loss. FEMA can provide assistance. I don't remember the exact number these days because it's adjusted for inflation. Last I remember, it was about $37,000 is the maximum benefit that FEMA can provide. Obviously, that won't replace a house.
Right.
It's a good initial start. Then there are other federal programs. The SBA, the Small Business Administration, makes disaster loans. And it's a little confusing for people because they hear the term Small Business Administration, they think it's for business, but they run a disaster loan program for all disaster victims and survivors. So someone doesn't have any insurance at all for their home, they can get a tranche of money from FEMA. Again, it's around $37,000 up to that amount if they're eligible. They can get a low interest loan from SBA. People that have insurance, they can use up to that 37,000 to meet unmet needs. FEMA will work with them to see. And then if they have a gap, they can also get a small business disaster loan as well. So you have to potentially work with a number of disaster programs in your insurance to put it together. And that could be a little daunting for people. State and local governments can play a big role there. State insurance commissioners, which you don't normally hear about in disasters, they tend to play a role in disasters in that they can help guide people through the insurance claims process. And if they're having a problem or a dispute with their insurance company, state insurance commissioners can step in and help to try to resolve those. So there's a number of different federal and state entities that work with people to help them recover. It's going to be a multi-year process
Right.
to build back Lahaina. I'm sure is probably going to take 5 to 10 years. There'll be people that won't rebuild. they'll sell their property and somebody else will rebuild. There'll be people that want to get right back in and rebuild. And so it will be a lengthy process.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Clifford.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.